Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the launch of South Asian Modernisms, Australian Scholarship and Global Perspectives. My name is Julie Willis. I'm the Dean of the Faculty of Architecture, Building and Planning. Firstly, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the unceded lands on which we work, learn and live, the Wurundjeri, Woiwurrung and Wurrung peoples. We pay respects to elders past, present and future, and acknowledge the importance of Indigenous knowledges in the Academy. I'm delighted to officially launch this exhibition and panel discussion, part of the travelling series organised by the Centre for Asian and Middle Eastern Architecture and the Society for Architectural and Urban Historians. It aims to raise greater awareness of the issue of untimely demolition of important architectural works in South Asia, building on work done by international institutions and highlighting the contributions of Australian scholarship. The exhibition you see on display here behind me will be open until Friday, 11th August, and tonight we'll be hearing a panel discussion focusing on emerging voices in architecture with 5 South Asian migrant women who have pursued diverse pathways in the built environment field. It's now my pleasure to hand over to Lisa Singh to officially open the event.
Good evening and thank you very much, Julie. My name is Lisa Singh and I'm the CEO of the Australia-India Institute at the University of Melbourne. And it gives me great pleasure to be here as part of this important exhibition opening tonight also. I firstly would also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we meet on, the Woiwurrung people, and pay my respects to their associated traditions and customs and elders past and present, and pay that respect to any First Nations people with us this evening. But I also would like to acknowledge Indigenous custodians of the lands across South Asia featured in this exhibition and pay my respects to their elders alongside those here in Australia. This exhibition, of course, South Asian Modernisms, Australian Scholarship and Global Perspectives, is a travelling exhibition and it's a panel talk series that we're going to hear from soon. Here organised by the Centre for Asian and Middle Eastern Architecture, CAMEA, and Society of Architectural and Urban Historians of Asia. I would firstly just like to acknowledge the Melbourne School of Design, its co-organisers of this exhibition, for their contribution to the event's success. The MSD's Professor Anoma Pieris, with Amit Srivastava and Peter Scriver from the University of Adelaide. This exhibition has evolved from South Asia-focused initiatives at internationally influential museums and collections, including the Museum of Modern Art, MoMA, in New York in 2022. And I think the support from Australian scholarship has been instrumental very much in shaping the strategy for acquisition and the display in these initiatives, with scholars from Australian universities acting as consulting advisors, contributors and co-curators. I want to talk a little bit about my connection to this exhibition or to my interest in modernism, and why, in that sense, I was excited to be part of this opening. First and foremost, I am actually a Tasmanian, and I noticed that the exhibition is going to Launceston, so that sparked my interest. But more broadly, my interest is twofold. Really, it's firstly as the CEO of the Australia-India Institute. I lead a team at the Institute dedicated to fostering support for and cross-cultural understanding of Australia and India. And that's done through policy-orientated research and analysis on important issues for both of our nations. We have a cultural diplomacy program that acknowledges that the Australia-India relationship is one built on people-to-people links, which was identified very much in the Peter Barghini's DFAT India Economic Strategy, where he recognised that our people were the most significant asset of all. Celebrating the efforts of Indian Australians engaging in community raising Australia's understanding of India are all key focuses for us under our program. So I'm very pleased to be seeing this exhibition doing just that, and of course doing it more broadly across South Asia. Secondly, I am personally a fan of modernist architecture and design, and I'll share a little bit more of that later. So tonight we gather to explore the legacy of modern architecture and its related design and construction processes in South Asia. To celebrate the RIBA, or Royal Institute of British Architects gold medalists, particularly Anoma Pieris, RIBA 2021, and Balkrishna Doshi, RIBA 2022, and Yasmin Lari, RIBA 2023. Through their captivating showcase of contextual photographs depicting representative spaces and buildings, this touring exhibition seeks to enhance knowledge and appreciation of modernist architectural heritage. Of course, there are many Western architects associated with India that have added to its rich architectural diversity and that have left lasting legacies. Most notably, of course, Le Corbusier, but also Walter Burley-Griffin, who was obviously visionary behind the city of Canberra's design, but also, some may know, also very influential in India, for example, through the Tagore Library in Lucknow, the University of Lucknow, and also Bhatia House in Lucknow that I had the privilege of visiting earlier this year. When I was in Lucknow, though, I actually wanted to see more of Walter Burley-Griffin's architectural works. And I found out that a lot of them had already been demolished. And the Bhatia House, even though I got the opportunity to spend time in that house, and it was still owned by the Bhatia family, it was absolutely surrounded by urban development. And it really felt like the last little house sort of in the region, in the sort of urban area, that perhaps, you know, in time to come may not be there if perhaps the family didn't want to keep it. It made me recognise the importance of how we need to elevate our understanding of modernist architecture and its place in our heritage thinking. To quote Mumbai-based architect Samira Rathod, if there had been no communication, if no one had seen Le Corbusier, what would Indian architecture be today? I think from what we know of South Asia's remarkable legacy of modern architecture and the rich plural stories that it creates, we know our horizons would not have been expanded as they have been through modernist architecture. Le Corbusier himself brought a radical alternative, in a sense, to the other imported influences that have been there, such as that of Sir Edward Lutyens in New Delhi. And one of my favourite buildings to visit, which I can see is part of this exhibition, and to meet people when I am in New Delhi, is the India International Centre, which, you know, is exciting to see people learning in Australia about that particular building here. The architects and their works featured here tonight really signify a new generation of expression in the post-independence period, adapting modern forms that are a clear departure from colonial architecture. These bold new forms of architecture recontextualise modernism and respond to the people and places in which they serve, to respond to human needs and that transcend cultures. With this exhibition signifying South Asia's remarkable legacy of modern architecture, today we focus on the remarkable talent represented across the South Asian region, including two prestigious award-winning architects from India, Pritzker laureate Balkrishna Doshi, and from Pakistan, Royal Institute of British Architects gold medalist Yasmin Lari. And tonight the works of the photographer Randir Singh, an architectural photographer whose works have been exhibited in the Museum of Modern Art in New York, shares his remarkable lens on architecture, modernism, and the urban landscape across South Asia. So with Australia's ties to the West and our linkage with the Indo-Pacific region and its own emerging voices, I think there is fertile common ground that exists for transcultural dialogues on the nature of modernity. This exhibition is really a remarkable contribution to that ongoing global endeavour of examining how modernism was applied in different contexts worldwide, and the ongoing value, the important value and wider importance of such modernist architectural heritage in South Asia and our region, and the real need to ensure they are protected from demolition. Dorsey's focus on human experience and an understanding of nature's order is essential, he says, to ensure buildings and places we build enhance people's ability to experience life. Couldn't agree more with that. In that, I think it is so important that we focus on life, the living, and of nature and people and places through these works. So I'm delighted to be part of this opening tonight. I'm also joined by one of our Institute's board members, the Honourable Tate Bailey, former Premier of Victoria. We are very much supportive of the work that is going on here at Melbourne Design School through this exhibition. And I'm delighted that together with the panellists to invite each and every one of you to explore this exhibition as it showcases Australia's own connections with the region's emerging voices, as it seeks to offer a diverse and pluralistic representation of South Asian modernism experience. Congratulations once again to the curators, the organisers and the backers of the exhibition, and thank you all for being here and celebrating modernism of South Asia. Thanks.
Thank you. So I have some thanks as well. I'd like to thank the Melbourne School of Design for hosting this exhibition, our Dean, Professor Jyoti Willis, the Honourable Singh for welcoming us, and the exhibition team who have made all these wonderful arrangements. Thank you. On short notice, I should say. And thank you to all of you for attending this event. I would especially like to thank my esteemed colleagues in Adelaide, Dr. Naima Iftikhar and Associate Professor Peter Scriber at CAMEA at the University of Adelaide for making this happen. They are hopefully watching online. They created exhibition panels featuring photographer Singh, whose work was displayed at MoMA. Thank you to Ranvi for sharing this spectacular work. And thank you also to all of you who are joining us on Zoom, and to my colleagues in SAUHA who are co-hosting this event. So our aim is to build awareness of South Asian architecture as more than temples, mosques, and palaces, but as worthy contributions to the development of the modern profession with distinctive regional sensitivities. Too often, South Asian architecture is seen only in terms of the Western architects who built here. Ben Corbusier, Louis Kahn, Edward Durrell Stone, etc. We want you to know and name with equal familiarity others local to the region. Balakrishna Doshi, Charles Correa, Achika Minde, Mutarul Islam, Jeffrey Baba, Valentine Gunasekara, Minetti Silva, Yasmin Gari, and many more, to learn about their extraordinary work, not as the masterworks of architects, but as transformative projects that decolonize professional practice. We want to highlight the many significant Australian scholars in our midst, whose dogged commitment to a region neglected by our discipline in the past has won international acclaim in recent years. I will now introduce you to some of the emerging stars in our Indo-Pacific constellation. So how this will pan out is that I will invite one of our panelists up on the stage, and I will have two questions for the panelists, and we will proceed like that. So first, I would like to invite Dr. Kelum Palipane. Thank you for your patience. We are kind of juggling the Zoom camera as well as our presentation here. So Dr. Palipane was awarded a PhD in creative research from this faculty and joined us as a lecturer in 2019. Through design and publications, she continues to develop a highly innovative design framework that fosters placemaking practice of the multicultural and minority community in neighborhood regeneration projects. She brings these methods into design teaching, focusing on marginalized diasporic and refugee populations in Australia. Thanks. Hello. So I'm going to say thank you for joining our panel and ask a couple of questions from you, if you can respond. So Kelum, can you tell us about some of the design research methods you developed in your PhD and how you apply that in teaching?
Yes, so forgive me for referring to my notes once in a while because I tend to go blank. My work was a response to seeing the limitations in the way how discipline and analysis of read and cut complex urban environments, particularly around multicultural community. So I developed a mapping methodology that focused on the rhythms of how people occupy the space and track that across time. And Monica Degan, cultural geography, says that what is being heard, touched, tasted, and smelled in a place, you have two questions of who is included and excluded in the place. So my mapping became multimodal in that I used different modalities like sketching and recording soundscapes and video for the notes and things to capture that multimodality. With that, I would also say that I engage in creative methodology. So this is where I try to graphically represent not just the things I was observing in place, but also the trying to capture the underlying analysis and interpretation of that phenomenon. So essentially the underpinning ideas. So how can we kind of in a creative way show that? And an example is my work in Peta, which is a neighborhood in Colombo, Sri Lanka, that supports traders from minority cultures in Sri Lanka. And what I found in that space is that relationships are all brokered according to a culturally anchored notion of reciprocity. So how do we capture that and how do we show that as well in terms of in a creative way? So that's something I interrogated recently. How do that in teachings? I asked students to, I guess, broaden their scope of what space is. So, for example, recently, Studio Exchange was a design using studio that I led recently, and we got students to engage in creative ethnography and then understand the social conditions, but also link it with the spatial as well. That kind of interlinking, coupling of that. I then get students to think, how can we rethink kind of notions, elements in architecture that are given. So for example, the idea of threshold, which usually means, a hard boundary between two different spatial conditions. And you think of it as perhaps something that's conformed, not a hard boundary. So essentially that's how I kind of did that.
So that kind of is leading to the next question, which is how do you take your experiences in South Asia and then apply it to the context in Australia? What kind of sensitivities do you actually, or how does South Asia sensitize you to certain things that you are then able to apply in the Australian context?
Yes, well, I think essentially to critique and expand, basically. So to critique our understandings of the possibilities of space, kind of set understandings of these things, also to expand on how we conceptualize space and not only our relationship to space, but our relationship to each other in space as well. So let me just think, as an example, so for example, the one what I was talking about in Petra. So it's a group of pig traders who are minority communities, and they use mobility, they use informality to kind of tactically navigate public sphere that they have very tenuous connections to. So that is still translatable to Australian conditions if we are considering minority populations and how they can tolerate access to public sphere. So with that, so there's a relevance to minority and migrant communities, but there's also, I think, relevance to the broader public and society as well, because they get to see new ways of being in space and occupying it. And I think the example I keep sort of bringing up that a lot of people can already relate to is this Lygon Street in Carlton that kind of emerged as the cafe street that is there because migrant Italians to Melbourne, first-world migrants of Italian migrants, and the fact that the idea of sitting outside in space and extended times outside or conversing over food and drink was not something familiar to Anglo-Australian culture before that, but now it's part of our collective culture, right? So it expands our understanding of different ways of being in space.
Thank you, Kelum. So Kelum does these wonderful drawings, which she also encourages her students to do, mapping all these different layers of experience. All right. Thank you, Kelum. So next, I'm going to introduce Dr. Melathi Saldin, who is a lecturer in Cultural Heritage and Museum Studies at Deakin University, but she also completed a doctoral studies. She is an international member of ICMA and is co-chair of the Sri Lanka ICMA's National Scientific Committee on Intangible Cultural Heritage. She's co-editor of the forthcoming Routledge Handbook of Heritage Instruction. An archaeologist and critical heritage scholar, Melathi's research looks at the politicization of heritage in Sri Lanka and other parts of Asia in the aftermath of war, with a focus on the potential of heritage for community resilience building. Melathi, welcome to this panel. Melathi, your research is both current and very challenging. Can you tell us why you chose to write about heritage destruction and community resilience?
Thanks, Anoma. So before I came to this country, I was actually an archaeologist in a university department in Sri Lanka. And coming to this country actually allowed me to kind of it was actually, my research was actually a required I had in Sri Lanka that I was able to explore here, coming here. I couldn't do it back home without any personal or professional repercussions. So it's actually a required that emerged for me as an archaeologist in a state university department and member of a non-Sinhalese minority, and working in a field that continues to have significant disparities in terms of ethnicity. So engaging in the research that I do has been a way for me to kind of make sense of the changes that I experienced, particularly within the Civil War. When I witnessed how archaeology was so comfortably folded into these nation-building agendas, especially in the North and the East. So this sort of fate that was unapproachable for many, many years. Not unapproachable because of the war, and despite telling that when the war ended, the archaeologists were the first groups to be allowed access into that space.
What you're describing is kind of cultural hegemony around heritage practice.
Yes.
In particular countries. Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah. And another point of big concern for me was this escalation of anti-minority rhetoric and violence, especially heritage-centric violence. This time targeting another minority, Sri Lankan Muslims. So, when my research started in this country, it was the conventional politics of heritage research, trying to understand how archaeological knowledge and practices utilized to challenge minorities, in this case, minority Muslims. So what my research showed was that, Sri Lanka is another cautionary tale of the dangers of co-opting archaeology and the complicity of archaeologists with further nationalistic agendas. But this also invited a kind of a more nuanced and more situated understanding of the entanglements of heritage, identity, and belonging in these kind of spaces. And also relatedly, it invited a nuanced understanding of what cultural heritage instruction is and how that changes form with the end of a void. With the end of the void becomes sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's less obvious with the contracting of spaces or freely expressing your culture, or it can be the appropriation of a space without the destruction of the building. It can be, failure to offer mechanisms to safeguard minority cultures. So there's different ways that heritage is destroyed, but global attention is always given to the bang destruction. Yes. But my research was showing that this wasn't the only part of the story. The focus on destruction and trauma alone was subsuming other narratives. How are communities responding to the loss of the heritage, challenges to their identity, belonging, and sense of place? I was particularly interested in the way everyday heritage spaces and cultural practices were used as by minority communities to challenge and redefine, reshape dominant heritage narratives that were often thrust upon them. This was a way for them to regain the control. And it's also nurtured spaces for cultural expression that exists outside dominant and not normative spaces. To enhance our resilience, that's the kind of context of my research.
Thank you. So your work falls within the interdisciplinary field of critical heritage study. Can you tell us about how your approach is applicable across the region? Why is it important to be critical when exploring heritage topics?
So in Sri Lanka and other parts in South Asia, as you know, heritage, the practice of heritage spaces, especially the kind of art within heritage, like archaeology, is controlled by the state. It's unlike places like Australia, where there's more diversity in the ways heritage spaces are interpreted, excavated, anything. And state heritage institutions in places like Sri Lanka largely operate within kind of colonial frameworks and focuses mostly on material heritage or monumental heritage. So yeah, like you were saying, the big temples, the big monuments, but what about the heritage of the land? So this kind of approach to heritage isn't really equipped to shed light on the social and political entanglements of heritage, but its impacts on the identity and belonging of minority communities. How does it impact the sense of place? So adopting a critical heritage lens in places like this is crucial, and particularly guided by the work of Tim Winter, my supervisor, who argues that critical heritage studies should focus on the large issues that bear down on and extend outwards from heritage and heritage. The focus should not only be on protection of cultural heritage, but it should be on other things, pressing issues like climate change, sustainable development, human rights, poverty reduction, so on. So particular interest for me is when we see these tropes of shared heritage that are increasingly seen as the basis for international cooperation and collaboration. Modi's policy, China's Belt and Road Initiative. But what do these tropes of shared and mutual heritage mean for marginalized communities? But what are the ground realities of these kind of shared tropes of tropes of shared heritage? I feel like Sri Lanka has benefited quite a lot from these kind of shared or mutual heritage programs. But there is a disconnect between the way tropes of shared mutual heritage are deployed in international arena and the way it's seen and deployed on the ground. So yeah, adopting a critical is important. Particularly for my research, this means a better understanding of the on-ground implications of the local global heritage interplays for minority communities and their heritage rights. So this is not to say that critical conversations are not happening, but for me, the question is, what is it doing to change things on the ground? And if it's really, are they reaching to the who are they trying to convince those migrants? And that is why I feel critical is important in spaces like Sri Lanka and other parts of South Asia.
Thank you, Melathi. Yes. We are moving on very quickly, although we wanted to sit and chat a little longer with each of the presenters. The next person that we have up here is architect Sonia Sarangi, who graduated from our faculty in 2008 and is a practitioner. She's co-director of her own practice and Endeavour, which is also located in Culture. Sonia was born and raised in Dubai and identifies as a global citizen from the Indian diaspora. She has practiced in Melbourne and in Singapore. Her letter to her younger self on calling out racism and harassment, published in Parliament, was a landmark declaration on the importance of saying no. Sonia's portfolio is extremely diverse, encompassing many learning programs. Sonia, what do you find most challenging about working in industry here in Australia as a woman of color? And how would you advise our Asian women graduates who are seeking professional opportunities?
Are we ready for some hard truths? What I found most challenging about working in industry here, specifically practice, is that profession is a lot less inclusive and egalitarian as it projects. We talk the talk, very few. In hindsight, this should not be a surprise when you consider the demographic that is overwhelmingly represented within the industry. My ideas have been overlooked, diminished, or combatively dismissed, only to be subsequently lauded when presented by a senior figure. So clearly the problem was not the idea. My experiences are a small glimpse. I've had the privilege of mentoring many female graduates over the years, and their stories reflect the spectrum of entrenched biases in hiring, microaggressions, bullying, harassment, unfair dismissals, and the realization that the glass ceiling is very rare. Might be thinking, understandably at this point, okay, this sounds awful. Why are you still here? Two reasons: mathematics and community. So you know how many Asian parents emphasize the importance of mathematics? We did. Now, maths isn't just about problem solving. It's a way of harnessing logic to look for patterns and then using those to predict outcomes through a series of steps. And so I used those principles to filter these experiences and to realize that the problem wasn't me, the problem was systemic. And then I predicted that if I projected these experiences onto a whole profession, we'd eventually be looking for the exit and help this issue fester in private. So I decided to look for the outliers, which, interestingly, is a mathematical term for data points that stand out greatly from the standard pattern. These outliers were people who truly engaged on an ideas level first, who saw what I brought to the table and were not distracted by my race, gender, or accent, and who did not feel entitled to cultural knowledge either. First outlier I met within the profession, went on to become my co-director that I had the honor of being in practice with the past decade. From that point onwards, I have slowly but surely sought and surrounded myself with more outliers. And with time, confidence has grown, and so has my inability to shut up. So thank you, Baba and Mom. You were so right. Maths is important. Now, community. Architectural education is such an intense bubble that most of us emerge wanting the approval of our peers above all else. And colleagues flourish in these kinds of in settings. But you know who were the groups that rarely batted an eyelid when they discovered I was leading a project. Clients, builders, tradespeople, consultants, council planners. To these groups, diversity is their daily experience. There's less resistance and questioning, and if anything, there is a thirst for new ideas. Because clearly the same old ways of doing things are not helping our cities at the moment. So as you progress in the profession, you notice the increasingly positive feedback loops when you see that spark of excitement that your ideas elicit in these groups of people. You become better at tuning out what the profession is telling you and tuning into the wider community. And ultimately, and most importantly, our projects are the community. And so the community is exactly where our focus should be. So my very simple advice to Asian women graduates is this: look for the outliers, whether they be practices or people. We can only spot them if we reject the status quo. And widen your lens beyond the industry to focus on your dealings with the community, because that is where you will see your true worth and purpose. And whenever you can speak up in safe spaces, please do. Brick by brick is how you break a wall. Hundreds.
Thank you. That's a very inspirational response. Now, can you also tell us about a project you most enjoyed working on? And what drove your interest? What did you learn from it? What challenges did you? And what was your favorite?
Favorite project. Well, I've enjoyed aspects of most projects I've worked on.
Yeah.
And if you permit me, I'll quickly actually just talk about 3 ones that were different in scale and had G9 practice, different aspects. So the first was a medium density apartment building in a middle ring suburb. We constantly, currently, you can see in discussions, we're bemoaning the missing middle in our cities here. And this was exactly that. It was a two-story, 8-apartment complex that would automatically have been approved under RESCO if it were a single McMansion. What drove my interest in it is my rich lived experience of medium density living in the Middle East and South Asia. Interestingly, we keep holding out 19th century Paris as the shining exemplar of medium density, but do you know who's been building the most volume of medium density in the past century by a long mile? Global South. Anyway, we overcame an adversarial VCAT system, even though we really shouldn't have had to be there. And we provided high levels of amenity for residents and embedded a generosity to the streetscape, only for our brave clients to be let down by a one-size-fits-all financing model. So what I learned from this project is that financial and tax frameworks around small developments are truly broken and will remain so unless we keep connecting the dots and pointing in the camera. That's it. Second one is the renovation of a heritage home in the inner city. What drove my interest in it was I wanted to find this elusive middle path between, slavish reproduction and a clean break that always tends to happen in this project. I wanted a bit of a quiet dialogue. In this case, our client wanted an easy to maintain flooring finish and material that would ground the whole project and connect the garden. The challenge was the tradesperson's insistence on doing things the standard way. And they just were not able to sort of envision what we were trying to suggest. And we certainly knew what they were suggesting would not meet the client's criteria. So something that often doesn't get talked about in the project process is fun. I gently convinced the tiler to attend 2 small prototypes, small additional cost, and just to test it out. The client turned to us and said, I trust you, go with your gut. When the mock-ups were done, the verdict was unanimous. Our suggestion was to stand out and met all the client's requirements. So these moments of trust across project teams and processes are absolute highlights. And the last one, very briefly, is one that is currently still in gestation. It is a fit out for a retail and a hospitality venue called Original Chico at Big Market along the heritage walkway of Victoria Street. My client is here today. I personally love this project because it is a rare opportunity for me to translate my South Asian heritage through design and celebrate its routines with both our thriving community as well as new wider audiences. And chai, cha, sai, chaya, however you call it, is a big deal in South Asia, no matter which part you are from. What I'm learning in this project is to resist tropes, some of them from within the community, of how we want to project ourselves, and also how to unread this transposed culture that we've brought here and take it forward. And like with all retail projects, my biggest challenge is that ideally this would have been built yesterday, but I'm up for the challenge. So to summarize, tackling the missing middle, balancing trust and risk, and interpreting culture are all challenges that are very dear to me, so I'm really enjoying the challenge. Thank you. Will be next Jyoti.
So Dr. Jyoti Shukla earned her PhD from our faculty, a primary research and publication interest by housing and land economics. Jyoti's doctoral research applied the economic theory of capability to design a data mechanism for the compulsory acquisition of land. As a natural expansion of her earlier research, Jyoti is currently focusing on designing a resilient compensation mechanism for those who are struck by natural and man-made disaster. Jyoti, can you tell us what led you to study the question of land acquisition in your research? What particular conditions sparked your interest in?
A very good question, Anoma, and very difficult answer I'll give to you because it has been a journey, a very unexpected journey, like for probably most of us who have been on here. So I grew up in the city, was born and brought up in Lucknow, which from Nigel's speech earlier, we probably can understand was once a very rich city in art, architecture, culture, and performing arts, everything, you name it. And today it is the most populous city of the most populous state in the most populous country. And my generation has seen that transition and the decay, which was consequential to it. So I was obviously very curious as a young adult growing up in Lucknow. How can I contribute to make the city retain what it was and to develop it and contribute in its built environment quality? And to my naive mind, the only way to contribute was physical look of a place. And that was a strong motivation that drew me into architecture studies. And as I was progressing in my studies, I was realizing that it is increasing my dissatisfaction and was increasing my urge for knowledge. Knowledge was required so that I can again contribute to the look of the built environment. And that made me progress or diversify a little bit from architecture to join urban planning, because I realized that most of these built environment, the environment of built environment can't be changed by one individual as a stakeholder or as a client, but we need to deal with a larger group of stakeholders with contesting claims on probably safety of land many a times. So as I was progressing in my educational trajectory, so was my dissatisfaction, and the urge for knowledge was growing. But then I came to a stop where I became the urban planner, and it gave me some power to influence the built environment. And I was fortunate to be involved with a very prestigious project in India, which is called the Gift City Project. It's a greenfield project, and therefore we had all the opportunity to develop things new. And the objective was to create it as a financial city, as a new financial city parallel to Mumbai. So ambitions were big. And that was kind of a dream project I wanted to be involved in, I was involved in, and it was a good opportunity. But as I said, as I was progressing in my career, the dissatisfaction was growing. And this was the most dissatisfactory job I ever did, because I realized that development in the form of built environment was happening at the cost of development. And I was questioning the definition of development in the Indian context. And why I say this is because this greenfield project was happening on green land, which was actually agricultural land. And I was reading every day in the newspaper at what low price the government is acquiring land compulsorily. And I was involved in such a project. While I was very proud of what the project was creating, at the same time, it raised a huge concern in me about how are we ignoring the original residents and owners of that land and not involving them as a part of that development. And that was again my motivation to pursue that work and the urge to contribute to this.
Thank you. So your new focus on post-disaster scenario resonates deeply with conditions experienced both in Asia and in Australia. You touched on the humanitarian rather than the market-driven dimensions of understanding property. Do you care to expand on that difference? Explain what the market-driven approach overlooks?
Absolutely. Yeah. Again, a very good question and a very difficult answer. I'll try to simplify the answer by taking a simple example of internet. We all use internet and we use it by paying some cost to the service provider. And I would say if we are on the same package, we use same amount of data, we probably pay the same cost. But if the internet is disrupted for a day uninformed, how will it affect you or how will it affect me? Will it be different? The answer is yes, it will impact everyone differently because we are using internet in different ways. We combine our personal ability with a resource which we call internet, convert it into meaningful uses for us. Now, if the disruption is to be compensated, will the cost of 1 day internet be good enough compensation for you and me or everyone else? And will it be the same across all of us? The answer is no, because all of us were deriving different functions which have impacted us differently, and therefore we will gain compensation differently. Now let's put, this is a small example, and property and land and being located at a place is a very complex structure, system which we create around ourselves, and we derive a lot of utilities from being in that system. And if that system is disrupted, monetary compensation is absolutely not good enough. That's how I look at it in 50 words.
Thank you very much, Jyoti. So now we have Dr. Naima Iftikhar, who completed her doctoral studies at Queensland University of Technology, focusing specifically on subject-situated architecture and design pedagogy. She joined our faculty as a lecturer and is an invaluable member of our BIT and learning and teaching team. In this role, she has most recently spearheaded efforts at developing culturally inclusive and responsive learning and teaching approaches. Naima, can you tell us more about subject-situated pedagogy? What does it mean for design teaching?
That's a great question, Anoma. So my research was about looking at how we can optimize design studio pedagogy in the Australasian context. And as a part of my research, I was also looking at how we have these transformed studio models within the Australasian context, where we have very less contact time between students and teachers, which comes down to almost like 3 hours a week at the undergraduate levels. So when as part of my research, what I did was that I was looking at the design program and the kinds of the nature of studio projects that were being offered to students. And as a part of my study, I went around and I used a case study of the School of Architecture at UT, which had a 4-year long bachelor's in architecture degree at that time. And I asked students, tutors, and subject coordinators as to how can we enhance design learning in architecture design studios. So I was actually looking for tips and strategies and principles around effective design learning. What I found through my research was that students value design projects which are rooted within real world problems, which enable them and equip them with the ability to address local and global issues, which enable them to develop that social and ethical responsibility. Whereas most of the programs that I reviewed were offering design studio projects which were very much hypothetical and focused on Western canonical issues and problems of the global north. So there is a lot of work that can be done and that we can do as academics. And I think that is one of the things that has inspired me to take on this very unique path of being in academic development, supporting good quality teaching, enhancing learner engagement within built environment education. So that's why I have taken on this role as lecturer teaching and learning here within BELT. And in terms of subject situated pedagogy, which you were asking me about, I think there's a lot that can be done in addition to just not focusing on design studio projects that students undertake where problems are rooted in local and global issues that are social in nature. But we can also think about how can we enable and empower our learners to not just focus on working on individual projects in silence, because just as Sonia was mentioning, she works with a group of transdisciplinary professionals. And when it comes to architectural design education, especially in studios, what we expect our students to do is to complete a design project, which is sometimes hypothetical in nature, and it's not give them the ability to develop that intercultural understanding of real world context, stakeholders and people, and it's important that we utilize this opportunity of designing studio projects that enable our students to achieve those goals. I think it's my working.
It is.
It's like, I think I need to do a quick post to the mic. So you guys can hear.
Thank you, Naima. So culturally inclusive design pedagogy have been emphasized recently with the introduction of indigenous knowledge concepts. But we have paid less attention to Asian cultural concepts and inclusivity. What must we do to achieve that?
I think that's a very good question. So for me, I have now started focusing more on culturally inclusive and responsive forms of professional learning opportunities that can be designed by academics. And it was inspired by my own journey. So in 2021, I became an associate fellow in the higher education department, caring from an Indigenous perspective, which means that in my former role in GUT, I designed curricula and learning and teaching activities in partnership with Indigenous stakeholders, and to provide that opportunity for our students to be acquainted with such forms of knowledge. But then, as I progressed, and within my current role here at BELT, what I found was that there's also an equal and competing, I must say, opportunity for us to consider, because at AEP here, even within this faculty, we have more than half our students from international projects, and they come from 73 different countries. That's a huge and valuable cultural reserve that we can tap into. So in terms of enhancing culturally inclusive and responsive parts of learning and teaching within our programs, within our pedagogy, it's important that we do a few different things. And before I share some tips and strategies, because that's what we do as academic developers, we like to empower academics and give suggestions and advice. I want to share this definition of what it means to be a culturally inclusive and responsive teacher. So according to the research that has been done by University of Sydney and Cambridge, to be a culturally inclusive and responsive teacher is to be able to understand and consider the different cultural backgrounds of the people we teach, and to include diverse perspectives in our teaching. So you can see we're tapping into a student-centered form of learning and teaching. We're using our students as an asset, but then at the same time, we're also developing ourselves. So how can we do that? First of all, we need to reflect on our own selves. We need to uncover our conscious and unconscious biases that we bring to our teaching and how we engage our diverse learners in classrooms. Secondly, we can think of how we can develop communities of practices within our faculties, where we can have book clubs or discussions about certain reading, or we can share case studies, or teaching practices where the teachers have included culturally inclusive and responsive ideas within their teaching, and that have worked for them. It is not to say that maybe we're positioning those academics as experts, but it is to grow that community practice and to share ideas and to then start implementing them in our own teaching as well. We can also think of how we can, within faculties, offer professional learning opportunities, something very similar to what I did this week in our faculty. We had a workshop on culturally inclusive and responsive teaching, where we looked at examples of Singh Japan, where one of our academics has been teaching students about some local issues in Japanese context. And then we looked at your subject, design history, theory and making, where we're using Melbourne as a place of learning and teaching, but we're using the opportunity to bring our international domestic students together, and how we can tap into the cultural reserve that each of the groups bring, and to share that knowledge and to develop that knowledge collectively as well. And then I would also like to suggest that we need to see how we can create space within our curriculum. We need to really think about decentralizing dominant Western economical forms of knowledges that have dominated pedagogy. It's not just within the Australasian or the global North context. I think it's equally valid in the global South context as well. Because when I did my architectural degree and from Pakistan, it was a 5-year-long bachelor's degree. The case studies and the precedents mostly used for teaching were very much Western-centric, Eurocentric in nature. So I think we need to shift the ways in which we're defining our curricula. And we also need to think about how we can think of respectful engagement with both Indigenous and non-Indigenous stakeholders to design those assessments and forms of pedagogy in our classrooms. And lastly, I have an interesting message to share, which is that I hope that the accreditation criteria and the national competency standards for architects in future will reflect the need to integrate intercultural understanding, given that we have a multicultural demographic in Australia, and we have immigrants from South Asia and other parts of the world. I think which is the reason to both recognize and celebrate in its own self, and it gives us an opportunity for thinking about how we can transform not only education practices, but also professional practices, because they don't need to work each other. And I think that those competencies can be added to the next iteration. It would be great, right? Thank you.
So that brings us to the end of our panel, and thank you all for patiently listening to this very interesting group of young people who are going to do great things in the future. Can you please give them another round?